So testing leads, testing VSL, but ad testing itself is usually the biggest chunk of that.
So, okay, you validated the creative. Then the next day, how many more campaigns do you launch? That creative, let's say it's perfect, man. That creative gave top metrics. Then you launch another campaign, 5, 10. If you're more aggressive, you launch a bunch at once.
How then?
Depending on the day, how do you want it?
In this case, usually as a standard process, there will be a pre-scaling phase. In the pre-scaling phase, we're going to launch around 5 or 6 campaigns with this creative to see how it performs. And in this case, I also think it's good to launch it in more than one ad account. So for example, duplicate it about 3 times within this account. Then launch at least 2 more campaigns in another account with this same creative. This is really to eliminate some variables and understand if it truly has potential for scaling, so that later you can actually start increasing to more campaigns, right?
That was interesting. Yeah, what we used to do there, but I think it ends up being a lot of people end up losing that money in a way, right? But the timing, right? It's always a balancing act, isn't it? You have to, then it depends on your cash flow. We used to test on 2 accounts at the same time. We would just take, I don't know, both accounts. We would add up the results from both accounts using the tracker itself, looking at the creative instead of analyzing them separately, because sometimes the creative would perform well in one account, but not in the other. But if the metrics were so good that even when adding the positive and the negative, the result was still good, then that creative would go to scaling. In our process,
So
instead of running it for one day, then moving it to another account, I think that's your workflow, and then going to a pre-scaling phase and then scaling, we would already do it in parallel. That way it's worse financially speaking, because if it's a bad creative, you immediately lose double on 2 accounts. So for Nutra, it was something where we would take a hit, like, I don't know, a loss of 5 or 10,000 reais in a day, just from testing, because Nutra is much more specific. But back in the InfoCart days, running ads was more relaxed because the financial volume was smaller. We
have done it like that, and there are really big operations that still do it. They like to do it that way. We've done it like that too, but I preferred not to go down that path. I prefer to test in a more, because we test a lot, ads. So I prefer, in testing, it runs on accounts. Accounts that are okay, accounts that have a good historical performance. It doesn't have to be the best account in the world, because we have a lot of accounts. So that's not the issue. But I just don't like to run creative tests, for example, on a new account, or on an account that historically has very low performance. Or a new account. I don't think that's good, because then you have a very clear variable right there, possibly. But there are actually both of these approaches, right?
personally, I think yours is smarter looking at it this way, because when we started doing the math there, because in traffic in the day-to-day, man, you want to make things happen.
You want to do it faster sometimes.
You want to do it faster. Then when I sat down once a month with the finance team and said, man, I spent, I don't know, 100, 200,000 just on testing.
Exactly.
For these last ones, if I had spent half in a smarter way, I would have increased the company's profit by 50, 100,000 reais.
Exactly.
Just by being less hasty. So there's that too, right? Yeah.
That's why we decided not to keep doing it that way. Because one of the biggest expenses today in an operation is
Check.
ads. Testing in general, right? So testing leads, testing VSL. But ad testing itself is usually the biggest chunk of that, because you're going to make a lot of mistakes. Ads, to get a good ad right. And if you take, say, 100 ads, most of them won't even make it to pre-scaling.
Or
Then there's another sequence there, another tier that will go to pre-scaling and won't get past that. And then comes the minority of them, which will go on to scaling. And there are still those that won't scale.
but that died in the middle of scaling.
That will die in the middle of scaling. They'll start there, but don't have the potential to really take off in sales.
Those I think are more dangerous.
You know, many times,
They're worse because they gave a sign of scaling, sold, I don't know, 50, 60,000. You say, man, this creative is good. So you keep trying. Do you have a process to stop trying? Like, when do you stop scaling that creative? Or do you get attached to it? How do you? I've gotten attached before.
from minimum rows, like I said, it depends on the offer. It depends on the operational side here.
Give a real example, something that happened to you.
For example, in Nutra, for instance, there have been cases where the creative was scaling. It came from a really good track record, but at some point it started to gradually decrease its ROAS. So what do I always tell the managers? You have to look at its overall history to make a decision, but on a day-to-day basis, you need to keep an eye on it. At least the last 7 days, the last 3, and yesterday. I like the manager to understand how the
Historical.
behavior has been to make decisions about whether I'm going to scale it up more now or not, or if I'm going to keep pushing it or not, you know? So it's a lot about that. So let's say if a creative is there, it's scaling, it's there with the ROAS. 1.6 historically, but for the past 7 days, it's been losing performance, always losing performance. And yesterday it was really bad. I have to rethink that. So that's where a lot of intuition comes in from screen time. Screen time, understanding it there really involves a lot of intuition. But for you to make the decision, if it really makes sense to keep insisting on it, because sometimes we're talking about a creative there, where just that one is already getting invested in 100, 200,000 reais a day. So you need to make good decisions, because otherwise you'll start burning through cash.
And
You'll kind of not have a stop loss. So you'll eat up all the profit you made with that creative.
so
He has to, it happens. People get really attached. And I think like everyone who has really scaled, who was already there on Facebook, probably everyone has made some bad decision in that sense. And they've already let it die, already let the creative eat up the profit,
basically gave back all the profit,
gave it back to the market,
resold to market, gave it back to the
gave the profit they earned back to Facebook. So you need to have a stop loss. Got it.